Something that I found particularly interesting in this week's readings was the article about the individual differences in beliefs about groups. I think that individual differences are often not thought about enough and are not always accounted for, especially on an organizational level. I found it particularly interesting that people who are more collectivist, or if they have a more positive belief about groups, perform better when working in groups than people who are from a individualistic society, or if they already have negative views and outlooks about working in groups. I think that this is important because it accounts for cultural differences. It accounts for the way in which people were socialized. And this is an important factor to consider when working in groups. An example I think of when I think of this is in a work setting when we are put into groups, but we are not obviously the ones choosing our groups. We don't always get to choose who we work with. So, yeah, it could go literally either way. So it could be a very positive experience or it could be a completely negative experience. I think that also another thing to consider is in the article, it mentioned that sometimes there's too much focus on group work. And I think this is true for both organizations and for school. Sometimes we are expected to always just work in these groups and our individual differences are not considered. It's not something that, either professors or employers want to consider. And I think that sometimes it can be detrimental. I think not so much on a school level, but definitely in a work setting, because it could really hinder the growth of that team or those individuals and affect their productivity. I would say that for the most part, I do enjoy working in groups because I think that everybody has a unique skill set that they can bring to the table. I think that differences can be a good thing because we can rely on each other's strengths. And if what one person is weak in, the other person might be strong in. So it could really just balance out all of those attributes of an individual. And I think that when it's done properly, it can be a very positive thing. But I would say that I think for my experiences, I can only really think of one experience where I think it works really well. And I would say that is at my work. I think that my work group is something that, functions like a well-oiled machine. We all have our own tasks. We all have our assigned roles. And we really do, I think, work as a team for our common goal and our shared goals. I think that it's something that I hadn't really experienced before because on a school level, it's always been like negative experiences. So it was definitely something new to me where I could actually see a more positive example of group work. And I think I would definitely attribute that a lot to my boss because she is very direct, but I think that she gives constructive criticism very well. So yeah, we have obviously conflicts and different opinions on things and different approaches, but I think that for the most part we are able to, iron out those differences and work well together. Especially when we look at our output, I think the proof is in the pudding kind of a thing. But at a school level, I think it's much more difficult. It's not as easy because often professors will like put us into groups and then it doesn't end well. I had one example of when I was in a group. There were like three of us in the group, and the professor assigned us those groups, but it wasn't necessarily randomly assigned, or not that I know of at least. They were the ones that just like stood there and like picked who we were going to be in a group with. And it didn't really end well. So the one group member was always absent, which I can understand if they, were going through things. But because they were always absent, they weren't there when when the professor was explaining what we had to do for the project. So that person just had no clue what we were doing or what the point is of the project or anything like that. And they ended up doing their work, but then I had to go in and completely redo their work because it was just the completely wrong answer and not what the professor expected of us. But I will say that that person tried very hard, and especially when I was able to explain what was expected of us, I think that they tried their best. But then the other group member just completely ghosted us. They didn't even pitch on the day of the presentation. And they didn't end up doing their work. So then I had to go in and do their part of the presentation. And then on the day of the presentation, I had to do their part as well. So it was less than positive, I would say. I don't really like working in groups when it comes to classwork, I think, because sometimes it can really I just prefer working alone. Yeah, I know my kind of work ethic when it comes to projects and things like that. So I would just much rather prefer to work alone. And if I do have to work in a group, I just want to pick my group myself. Because I think that then I'm able to, pick the people that I know will do work. Because obviously I can see, I would know the people. So I would be able to pick people that I know are going to positively contribute to the group project. So, yeah.